Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today. Over 1,000 participants have registered to join us this evening, and our goal is to help inform and equip you for the upcoming changes we anticipate under the Trump administration. My name is Krista Kartson, and I'm the Senior Director for Sponsorship Initiatives with Welcome.us. But that's not the title I care about most. I'm also a sponsor, like so many of you. I know the joy of welcoming a family at the airport and all the firsts of sponsorship through Uniting for Ukraine. And I'm also currently eagerly awaiting the arrival of a refugee family whom I'm sponsoring with my church through the Welcome Corps. And as sponsors, many of us have questions about the future of welcoming broadly, as well as how we can help our new neighbors navigate potential changes to their status. Due to the overwhelming response with 4,000 registrants for the webinar we held on November 15th, we decided to host a similar session today to bring this information to folks who could not participate last month. And we'll record it this time so you can reference and share it as helpful. So if you joined us on November 15th, you'll notice that much of the information we'll share today is the same as what you heard last month. And we really won't have much new information until after the Trump administration takes office on January 20th. So, like our previous session, today's content will cover sponsorship programs, specifically Uniting for Ukraine and the processes for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, and the Welcome Corps. We'll cover what we might expect from the new administration regarding these pathways and how it may impact people you are sponsoring, and the next steps to continue our joint work of welcoming. Now, just one point of clarity that came up in our last session. Today, you'll hear phrases like welcome.us and the Welcome Corps. And I wanted to provide just a bit of context because even I've gotten a bit confused at all the welcome language. This event is hosted by Welcome.us, and we are a nonprofit organization founded in 2021 to equip and empower Americans across the country to participate in the work of welcoming newcomers, primarily through sponsorship. And now the Welcome Corps is a State Department program launched in 2022 that enables Americans to sponsor refugees as part of the United States Refugee Admissions Program. Welcome.us is not a decision-making position, and we do not have access to Welcome Corps applications. That work is done by the US government and specifically the State Department. But as a nonprofit organization working in the sponsorship space, we at Welcome.us are here to share what we know so far and do our best to begin to equip you with the information that will help you navigate the coming months ahead. So please feel free to share your questions in the chat throughout the duration of our event, and we'll try our best to address what we can today. What information we don't have today, we likely simply won't know until the administration takes office on January 20th, and we'll be offering a lot of updates as those changes occur. So to share what we do know so far, it's my privilege to introduce you to Welcome.us President Anya McMurray and our Vice President of Content and Communications, Mana Kashfi. Anya, thank you for joining us today. I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Krista. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening for many of you and this afternoon for some of you on the West Coast. Welcome.us is a relatively new organization. It was founded just over 3 years ago by a small group of leaders from different political perspectives, but who share a deep belief that Americans are welcoming and that welcoming newcomers is more important than ever. And so, as many of you know, welcoming helps families find safety and reunite. It brings new populations into our communities that make them stronger and more vibrant, and it transforms our own lives. Welcoming is a strong American value. Welcoming, helping, working together is what Americans do when we are at our best. Many of you are here today because you believe in that vision too. Maybe you're a sponsor serving as a guide and neighbor to a newcomer already, helping them find housing, jobs, enrolling their kids in school in the community. Or maybe you support newcomers in other ways, Or maybe you're interested in becoming a sponsor, or maybe you're waiting for the person that you've decided to sponsor to arrive. We also know some of you are interested in learning about what you can do going forward. Honestly, the work of making it easier for Americans to get involved has been successful beyond our wildest dreams. You come from many different places with many different ambitions and many different reasons to do this work. But you are among millions of Americans from all walks of life in every corner of the country who have stepped forward to welcome. It's extraordinarily hopeful work. And I am so grateful for this reminder of what we are capable of when we work together. I also want to acknowledge that this is a really uncertain time. We have a new administration coming in that has suggested there will be big changes for immigration and newcomers. And as Krista mentioned, there's a lot we simply won't know about those changes until President-elect Trump is sworn in on January 20th. Some policies that we have been working with come from executive actions taken by the president, in this case, President Biden. So, for example, the Uniting for Ukraine program, which offers humanitarian visas that allow people to come to the US from Ukraine with American sponsors. Because it's an executive action, one president's decision can be reversed by his successor, and we may see the end of some of these programs. Other policies, like the asylum process, for example, are the product of laws that require action by Congress in order to change. And there are things that are permanent and very unlikely to change. For example, once you have status as a refugee, that's pretty unshakable. In the early days of the next administration, we expect to see a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty. We will work hard to keep you informed as these changes become public. And it will be important for you to share that information with the people you are supporting and others in your community. We will keep doing what we are doing together, helping, supporting, and welcoming. Before we turn to more specifics about these programs and the questions that so many of you have come here today with, we want to take just a moment to show you the impact you've already had. Those of you who are already sponsors know that welcoming someone to safety is a life-altering act with generational impact. But I wonder if you know how this community of welcomers, all of you, is literally transforming and revitalizing our nation, bringing people together and building on values that make us stronger as a collective. Take a look at the welcoming nation you have built. The map on the left is the welcoming capacity we had as a nation when Welcome.us was launched just 3 years ago. Our national capacity was limited to what government could do alone with public tax dollars. It's a system that over the last 30 years had welcomed an average of just 70,000 refugees a year, even though the number of people forced to flee their homes quintupled over that same time. Private sponsorship programs, like the ones we are talking about today, were launched in part out of a belief that by tapping into the compassion and generosity of our American communities, people just like you, we could welcome so many more. And the map on the right proves this to be true beyond anything we could have imagined. An estimated 2 million Americans in 12,000 zip codes across all 50 states have sponsored over 750,000 newcomers to come to the United States. So when we say you are not alone, we mean it. It is this beautiful community of welcomers from every corner of the American tapestry with whom we are going to face the uncertainty of this next period of our country. Now I'd like to introduce Mana Kashfi, our VP of Content and Communications, to talk through some of the more technical content, which I know is really the basis of so many of your questions. Mana?
Thank you, Anya. Hi, everyone. I join Krista and Anya and the entirety of our Welcome.us team in expressing gratitude for all of you here today and all that you have done to help welcome newcomers to our communities. The impact of welcoming is something that I have felt personally as my family and I were refugees who were able to build a new life as newcomers in Canada when I was in elementary school. And the reason I'm here today and dedicated to supporting all of you in your welcoming journey is because I know firsthand the life-changing and generational impact that a single act of welcome can have. So thank you for being a part of this community and for all that you are doing to help us grow this community. Okay, let's get started on the technical stuff Anya mentioned. First, a little background on these programs. There are two primary legal pathways through which sponsored newcomers have arrived, and they each have unique characteristics. You're going to hear us talk about refugee status and humanitarian parole status. In the United States, by law, refugee status is a permanent legal status for residing here. Presidents can decide how many refugees to admit each year, but once granted refugee status in the United States, it is a permanent pathway to citizenship. Humanitarian parole by law is a temporary status designed to respond to immediate crises. The law gives the president the authority to decide who gets it, when to use it, and when to turn it off. The Welcome Corps is a U.S. State Department initiative. It's part of the U.S. government's Refugee Assistance Program, or USRAP, which was established by Congress in 1980. For the USRAP program, refugees are processed overseas and granted refugee status before arriving in the United States. It's meant to respond to long-term crises for refugees who would otherwise spend their lives in refugee camps in limbo with no hope of being able to return home. Now, the law under which the U.S. refugee program was established specifies that the president should each year designate the total number of refugees the U.S. will admit and under what criteria. So the current administration established criteria to let community sponsors in groups of 5 raise the private funds to welcome and resettle refugee newcomers. Because refugee status is determined before newcomers arrive, refugees who come through the Welcome Corps enter with immediate work authorization and, as I mentioned, a path to citizenship. Many of you have asked questions about what will happen to the Welcome Corps under the new administration. Honestly, the bottom line is we don't know for certain, but during the campaign and since the election, the incoming administration has indicated that they will reduce refugee admissions, which is consistent with the approach President Trump took during his first term. We also anticipate that there could be a slower processing of applications as policy is reviewed and new criteria is established. This was also something that happened under the previous administration. Importantly, if the new administration reduces refugee admissions or changes the Welcome Corps program, by law, it won't impact refugees already in the United States. And those who have been approved for arrival through the Welcome Corps will continue to arrive until the new administration determines otherwise, which would not happen until after January 20th. We know from our work with the Welcome Corps Consortium that new applications continue to be submitted daily, and there has even been great momentum in just the last week to get new applications submitted. The program is still in full operation, including application support, case review, and travel issuance. The Welcome Corps team is currently processing applications submitted by more than 125,000 Americans, stepping up to support refugees from over 45 nationalities who are currently undergoing processing in more than 100 host countries. Given this reality, processing can take 6 months up to a few years. So it's important to submit applications as soon as possible and be responsive to any emails that the sponsor group coordinator receives from the program team. This slide shows the steps for the refugee referral process after you apply to sponsor someone you know through the Welcome Corps. Over 400 of you who registered for today's event indicated that you've submitted a Welcome Corps application, and the application is currently being reviewed or is otherwise in process. Each case varies, and there's no set amount of time between each step in this process. It is important to check your email inboxes and application portal frequently for updates regarding your particular Welcome Corps case. As a reminder, Welcome.us is a separate organization from the Welcome Corps, and we cannot answer questions about individual cases. So we encourage you to review the Welcome Corps FAQs on their website and reach out to the Welcome Corps support team with any questions. My colleagues are dropping that link into the chat now. Now, let's take a moment and talk about humanitarian parole sponsorship programs. One important difference between refugees arriving via the Welcome Corps and families coming through humanitarian parole sponsorship is the discretionary nature of the parole program. As noted, under the law, the authority to grant or revoke humanitarian parole is a decision made by presidents. It's meant for urgent crises for which people may need immediate safety, like what we've seen in Ukraine, Haiti, and other countries in recent years. But because it is a discretionary authority, presidents can decide to use it or not. A new administration can make changes to the program without a change in the law. So change can happen quickly. The current administration determined that the crises facing people in Ukraine, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela warranted the use of humanitarian parole and allowed people from these countries to come to safety in the United States if they had the support of a sponsor. Importantly, the president can only grant humanitarian parole for a period of up to 2 years. Presidents can also redesignate parole, essentially extending it, but newcomers with humanitarian parole should strongly consider applying for more durable legal status, like asylum. Again, there is a lot we don't know, and there's often a difference between campaigning and governing. But what the Trump campaign has said is that they will end some or all of these humanitarian parole programs. The government could stop accepting new applications and also processing current applications as soon as January 20th. Additionally, the new administration may decide not to renew parole or work authorizations for humanitarian parolees already here when their current status expires. So it's really important that you learn about the other statuses that may be available to the newcomers you have welcomed. For example, applying for asylum, which is a way for people who are already here in the country to have their cases reviewed and be considered for permanent status. Welcome.us recently produced a webinar in partnership with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, covering alternative legal status options for newcomers who arrive to the US through humanitarian parole. If this is relevant to your situation, I'd encourage you to watch the recording of that session. My colleagues will drop that link into the chat as well. Let's take some questions. Back to you, Krista.
Thank you so much, Mana, and thanks to everyone who submitted questions in advance. I'm going to tee up some of the more common questions submitted during registration. Anya, we received a number of questions from prospective sponsors considering whether to submit applications either for humanitarian parole or for the Welcome Corps. What advice do you have for these folks?
Yeah, it's really a great question. What we recommend is getting your application in as soon as possible. There's no guarantee that it will be processed and approved in time. Every case is different, and there is a lot to process right now, but the chances are better the faster you get your application in. And as we noted, we can't be certain about what comes next, so it's really a great thing to be able to get your application in as soon as you can.
That makes sense, but thinking more broadly, are there alternative pathways other than sponsorship to authorize travel to the US for those we're hoping to sponsor?
I've been getting that question a lot lately, understandably. Unfortunately, the US immigration system is very outdated, and there are very few legal pathways that allow people to come without waiting years and years, even when they have someone waiting for them, willing to help them get settled. That is one of the reasons why these new sponsorship programs have been so important and so successful. They're a new approach that have allowed so many people to find safety quickly and without a big drain on government dollars. Because immigration law is complicated and every case is unique, I think the best advice, if you are able, is to seek counsel from an immigration lawyer about what options you may have based on your specific circumstances.
Thank you, Anya. And now we've received a number of questions from sponsors who submitted Welcome Corps applications specifically for refugees based in Uganda. They understand there's a temporary pause in the review of these Welcome Corps applications in particular. Do we have any idea of when this pause might be lifted?
This is such an important question, and we understand and share the urgency for those of you with family or friends based in Uganda. Unfortunately, this is where, because we are a nonprofit organization and not the US government, there is simply a lot we don't know either. What we understand is that applications submitted before May 20th, 2024, by sponsors for individuals in Uganda are not affected by this pause. So applications submitted before May 20th of this year are not affected by the pause. But we don't know when cases submitted after May 20th will begin to move more quickly. We are tracking the issue very carefully, and as soon as we hear that the pause has been lifted, we will immediately share that information out with all of you.
Understood. I'm going to turn it now to Mana to ask on behalf of both Welcome Corps and Humanitarian Parole sponsors who have submitted applications and are still waiting for travel authorization. Many folks have written us saying they want to know the status of their cases. How can they check their status, Mana?
Sure. So your online account with the Welcome Corps or with USCIS, if you've applied under humanitarian parole, will always have the most up-to-date information. Checking for updates and messages on the application portals for these programs is the best way to get the most up-to-date information. We do not have details about individual cases. That is information that is made available directly to you.
Thank you, Mana. Now, we've talked about the importance of applying for alternative status options for newcomers who have already arrived in the US with humanitarian parole status. Can you please give us a bit more information about what those alternative status options might look like?
Absolutely. So if you've already sponsored someone through humanitarian parole and they are here in the US, they may be eligible for another form of legal status. These are often complex processes with unique requirements. The requirements can vary by when people entered the country or what country they're from originally. So we put together a chart to give you a snapshot. I want to highlight a few things that you'll see noted here on the chart. Asylum, as I mentioned earlier, is a way for individuals to be considered for permanent protection status, very similar to refugee status. People who seek asylum submit an application and undergo a review by an asylum officer or an immigration judge. If granted, asylees have the same status as refugees and can apply for US citizenship in the future. Temporary protected status, like humanitarian parole, is a discretionary authority. It allows an administration to authorize temporary status to individuals of a particular nationality already in the United States, should it be unsafe for them to return home. There are expiration dates set by country, as you can see in the chart, but historically, once granted, individuals have been able to reapply and maintain status. And then there are options for particular nationalities like the Cuban Adjustment Act, which allows Cubans to apply for permanent residency through a law and program that was established by Congress for them based on foreign policy interests. Now, I know this is a lot of information and you no doubt have many questions. The webinar we recently co-hosted with the American Immigration Lawyers Association describes these alternative status pathways in detail. We do a deep dive there. And again, I encourage you to watch the recording of that session. And our team is also actively developing an accompanying written guide with the same information for ease of reference. You can take a look at the YouTube link in the chat to view the webinar, and stay tuned to our website to get a download of the guidance document in the coming days.
Thank you, Mana. We've been getting a lot of great questions in the chat, including questions on specific cases. And unfortunately, we just do not have the ability to address case-specific questions, either in this time or as a nonprofit organization. So we want to encourage you to use the resources that we share with you in the email and just monitor your inbox to get that case-specific information answered. But some of the more general questions we received include this one. Anya, this one's for you, and it's really a two-parter. First, can the Welcome Corps program be rescinded by the incoming administration? And if so, how can we help the Welcome Corps under the new administration to ensure we can continue sponsoring refugees and maintain our culture of welcoming?
Those are really excellent questions. We are still hopeful that the next administration, will continue all of these programs, and particularly all of these programs, period. We also think that the Welcome Corps, because it relies on, as Mana described, the U.S. refugee system that is a program deeply embedded and actually created by law and housed at the State Department, it is a somewhat more secure program than the two humanitarian parole programs, Uniting for Ukraine and the Process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, which are wholly discretionary by the president. Welcome Corps, however, remains very vulnerable because it really is an initiative of the Biden administration. It may, as is often the case, initiatives from one administration, if successful, carry over into the next and become more deeply ingrained in our system, in our government bureaucracies. That is certainly our hope for Welcome Corps. I think it is worth noting that, like all good government programs, it can be really valuable to let your elected members of Congress and other elected officials know that you value this program, that it is doing something good, that you want to keep it going, that you see the benefit in your own community. And I certainly think that that is a reasonable thing for all of you to consider doing.
We had another question that asked, do you have plans to put the welcome.us community in touch with each other in some way so that we can build some collective political power to push for the policies we want?
That is another excellent question. I think we're really looking to take our cue from you all. If you all want to be more connected to each other, we are actively exploring ways of doing that now, and we're really interested in hearing your ideas. We think there's so much to be learned and shared, sponsor group to sponsor group, welcomer to welcomer, and our sense is that sense of community and shared information and shared action will become more and more important as things change, as policies change, and we're all having to share information and react to it effectively. So I think, again, like, keep an eye out for updates from us. I think we are leaning in that direction, and we are really eager for your ideas to know What could we be doing that would be most useful for each of you?
Since we're on a roll, I'll pose the next one to you as well. We heard from Mana about asylum and other alternative status options. Can you share a little bit more about asylum? Because that seems to be a pathway that's similar to that refugee status, as Mana mentioned. Can you talk more about whether sponsors should go ahead and apply for asylum alongside their beneficiaries?
So I think it is really worth folks taking the time to watch the video conversation that we had with an immigration lawyer from the American Immigration Lawyers Association. We go into depth on that question, and we also provide some resources, I think, that have been included in the chat by a partner organization of ours called the Asylum Seekers Advocacy Program. They provide very detailed question and answers and video how-tos, both in English and in Spanish, that will get into some of the details that you should be considering. There are some real benefits to applying for asylum if the person that you have supported and sponsored is eligible. Some of those benefits include being able to access a work authorization under the asylum application. It's usually about 6 months into the asylum application process. There are some other benefits that you should be aware of as well, but those are really detailed in those legal information documents, and I'd like to direct people to those.
Thank you, Anya. We've got a question for families who are far in the process but not yet here. So there's an expectation that they'll arrive in the coming weeks. Once they do come, will they still be able to get the documentation and get on a pathway to citizenship? Or can that be changed based on the new administration?
If you are coming through Welcome Corps and you have arrived, if you're coming through Welcome Corps, you are arriving as a refugee. And that status is very difficult to modify. So folks who arrive through the Welcome Corps are in a very strong and sturdy position once they are here. That is different than folks who are coming through the humanitarian parole sponsorship programs, again, Uniting for Ukraine and the process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. Those two pathways are much more unstable in that they are very much at the discretion of the president. So even though people have come through the legal pathway, they have followed all the rules, they have arrived with legal status, they're able to get work authorization, those rules may change, leaving them in a much more precarious position, which is why we are encouraging people, if they are able to talk to a lawyer about the specifics of their case. If you're not able to talk to a lawyer, please do review, again, the information that we've provided. It will give you some really good guidance.
Thank you, Anya. And I could attest, as a sponsor myself, that conversation with Ayla was really eye-opening and helpful for me to understand my next steps for being a humanitarian parole sponsor. And kind of double clicking on that humanitarian parole pathway, we've received a lot of inquiries from sponsors who have submitted that I-134A application potentially months ago, and they have noticed a slowing in the process or delays in the process of review. Can you explain a little bit about why there could have been delays in this process?
Yeah, we are hearing that from a lot of folks. I think so for the CHNV side, there are delays because it is a very, very popular program, and there are long wait lists, and there's just a high volume of cases. There are also, however, new vetting requirements that USCIS adopted several months ago that have slowed the process down for both humanitarian parole programs. So things are just moving a little slower. We have been in regular touch with our partners at USCIS. They assure us they are moving absolutely as quickly as they can. They know how important this lifeline is for so many people, and they are working through these cases as diligently as they can, as quickly as they can.
Yeah, and just a bit ago, you referred to like folks can actually contact their representatives potentially about their eagerness to have these programs continue. We just got a question in that says, is it helpful to ask representatives to support the Welcome Corps during the Trump administration?
That's a really, yes, I think so, but I think we also just, we don't know is the truly honest answer. Um, I think it is, as someone who used to work in the Senate, I know that when constituents called and they had specific concerns, or they wanted to express their enthusiasm for a program that was really helping them and that was at risk of being eliminated, that was important information to know, and information that I shared with the senator for whom I worked. And so I think it is important. It's certainly, I think it is valuable to share how important these programs have become to you.
So valuable, Anya. Thank you. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mana next to hear from you. Many of us know what our next steps could be, what the most relevant information we need to know is because of what you shared in the last half hour or so. But honestly, just as you shared, Anya, there is a lot of information we just don't know yet. Um, Mana, can you explain a little bit more about when we should expect to know more about the actual new policies and how they'll be implemented?
Yeah, so Krista, as you mentioned, we don't know for sure. I can't give you an exact date, but I expect that we will see more executive actions by the new president, maybe in the early days of the administration. But we won't know for certain until they make official announcements and we see the details of what they have decided to do. What I can say as the person, leading the team that is sending you all of the emails and updates and communication that you're getting, is that we will stay on top of it and we will do our best to keep you all informed of what is happening as it happens. And we're committed to getting that information out in a timely fashion and providing the most accurate information to our community that we have access to.
Thank you, Mana. And as the person who's leading the team, getting all that information out to us sponsors, what is your best advice or parting words to sponsors tuning in right now?
I think, in the simplest terms, don't panic. We are learning a lot, and there's still a lot we don't know. And maybe even more important than that, support the newcomers you have sponsored. Make sure they have the reassurance they need. Make sure they have the information they need. They are hearing so much that they may not understand or that is confusing, especially in the context of being in a new country and being within a new political system that is unfamiliar to them. I remember when my family was first getting settled in Toronto, the most critical lifeline we had were the neighbors and friends who made themselves available to answer questions about complicated paperwork or about navigating all of the systems that were new to us. Having that friendly voice on the other end of the phone line or the patient companion in a busy government office makes all the difference between being able to make informed decisions and succeeding as a newcomer and feeling overwhelmed and very alone. And Krista, I know as you've shared, you are a sponsor yourself multiple times over. So what advice would you give to your fellow sponsors who are with us here?
That's right. As a fellow sponsor who has both welcomed newcomers and, as I mentioned, I'm also eagerly awaiting additional arrivals. The best advice I can offer are just the next few steps to consider depending on where you are all at in your journey. So if you've been considering sponsorship and you believe that your community has a role to play in welcoming refugees, I highly encourage you to submit an application as soon as possible. particularly if you're willing to sponsor through the Welcome Corps and be matched with a family who has already completed their refugee processing for the United States. There are thousands of people who have already been vetted and approved, but they need a sponsor to be able to come to the United States and be that friend that Mana just described so eloquently. To sponsor through the Welcome Corps, you do need a group of 5 adults. We got that question in the chat. Someone was really eager to sponsor, but they couldn't mobilize a group of 5 in their community. That is a requirement for the Welcome Corps, and there are resources on the website to help you spread the word locally and to recruit members of your group. But you're not alone, even in that. There's resources on how to recruit a group, resources on how to fundraise, and how to navigate your sponsorship responsibilities and help newcomers. My colleague just dropped those resources in the chat for you. And this also includes funding to help you meet the minimum fundraising requirement. So if you're applying to sponsor a refugee who you do not know, or if you have a US military veteran or active duty military member in your group and you're applying to sponsor an Afghan ally, funding opportunities are available to you. Please see the links in the chat for more details on those. And if you're already sponsoring a newcomer through humanitarian parole sponsorship programs, you can take quick action to research alternative legal status options. And a great place to start will be reviewing our webinar. As Mana just mentioned, that we recently co-hosted with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and that now is going to be linked in the chat for you. Finally, you can donate to welcome.us. Our Welcome Fund supports hundreds of community organizations and thousands of sponsors and newcomers. These organizations will be on the front lines of supporting newcomers throughout whatever comes next, and your donation will help us continue to support them as they navigate this uncertain time and support newcomers they have welcomed. We'll be sending an email with a recording of this session, as well as key summarized takeaways from our conversation. Please feel free to share it with anyone who would benefit. And the final link in the chat shares where you could find the latest information on changes to sponsorship programs and how you can continue being a welcomer. The updates on this page will evolve, particularly as the next administration assumes office on January 20th and begins to implement its policies. So please check in with us there to register for our highly anticipated post-inauguration event next month and stay updated on the latest news. As things change, welcome.us strives to be a center of gravity for welcomers across the country to find belonging, connection, and resources. After this event ends, a survey will appear on your computer or phone screen. We'd really appreciate it if you could take just a moment to respond. Let us know if this event was helpful for you and how we can partner with you in your next steps. Thank you all again for taking time out of your schedules to join us, for your compassion for our new neighbors, and for being an important member of such a powerful community of welcomers. Be well, and we'll see you soon.